Good evening, folks. Glad that you are here on Zoom for the Rethinking Church Properties webinar. Some of us are having rough weather this evening. I'm in Galveston and it's dark and it's thundering and lightning, and I know it's happening in Houston as well. So I my electricity a couple of times has blinked on and off this evening. Uh, so I'm hopeful that it'll stay on while we're on this Zoom. And Reverend Will Reed is also with us somewhere on the screen. And Will was to in from Nashville today. And because of the weather, in Houston. He is still stuck in the airport in Nashville. So Will may join us. Oh, I see you on the screen. See your name, Will. And then Melissa Mayer, I think you're here as well. So we are glad to have Melissa and Will with us. I have started recording our session so that we're able to share our recording tonight with others around the conference. I want to first say thank you for those who attended our first webinar back on January 29th. Some of you may remember our very first webinar, and we did an overview of rethinking church property. We were thinking about inside the church and how churches might have available space on the inside. Reverend Jill Daniel made a presentation about after-school care and preschool care if you have a facility that has available space for childcare. And so she is the We Love All God's Children director and is able to help churches who have available space, who would like to have childcare at their church as a way of generating revenue, but also making a difference in their community. We also had Park Thrive, the guys from Park Thrive, and they were helping churches consider their parking lot and some income and revenue using their parking lot. And then finally, we had SteepleCom. Tom Moylan from SteepleCom shared with us about how churches are using their facility to generate revenue as it pertains to cell towers and battery backup and solar panels and electric charging stations for EV vehicles and so forth. So I know that Jill and the Park Thrive guys and also Tom have met with several churches and have begun the process to help with that. Many of the questions from the very first session had to do with unrelated business income tax. And so we have someone that's going to speak to us later this evening, Ashley Voss. Ashley is a CPA with Ratliff and Associates, our auditing firm for the conference. And so Ashley will be with us for that. We also have two other folks that are going to be with us in just a moment. We have Kerry Smith. Kerry is with Kerry Sumpter Smith is a senior pastor at White Rock United Methodist Church in Dallas. And Kerry's going to share about ministries there. And then we also have two guys, Matt Austin and Matt Patrick, who are co-pastors of University UMC in Tulsa, Oklahoma, who are also going to be with us. So first we'll have Reverend Kerry Sumpter Smith, and then from White Rock UMC to share about revenue in their building and some unique and creative ministries related there in White Rock. And then we'll also hear from the co-pastors in Tulsa. And then finally, we'll have Ashley Voss, our CPA, to share with us. I am looking. Is Kerry Sumpter Smith? There you are, Kerry.
Yes, yes, yes,
Welcome.
I'm here.
We are glad that you're here. I am going to continue admitting folks to be a part of our meeting tonight, and I'm going to go ahead. It's 5:35. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you and let you begin sharing about your ministries at White Rock. So thank you for being here. I hope the weather's okay for y'all up in Dallas.
Yes, yes, yes. It's lovely weather in Dallas. Um, it's just so good to be with you. I am actually coming home tonight. I am from the Texas Annual Conference. I grew up at Chapelwood. My husband, I met in college in San Antonio, but he said that Dallas was better than Houston. So I have lived here since coming to seminary at Perkins in 1997. Got certified as a candidate in Houston. Ben Shamness was my district superintendent, I think.
Yes.
So anyway, but Houston is home.
Well, welcome
And then
back
I'm
home.
gonna thank you. And then I'm gonna have to leave when at 6 when my time is up because our son is getting his Eagle Scout tonight. And
Oh,
so I'm sorry not to hear the rest of the presentation, but thank y'all for having me.
and we appreciate you being here. So thank you.
Yeah. So I have been the pastor at White Rock UMC in East Dallas since July 2022. Mitchell Boone, who is currently the pastor at First Methodist downtown Dallas, is really the pastor who turned the church around. So 10 years ago, White Rock voted to close, not once, but twice. Unfortunately, no one would buy the building. It is a huge building, 3 levels, 65,000 square feet, maybe. Built in the 50s, in the 60s, our elevators from 1965. 1965. Um, and so Mitchell really helped the church to see the building not as an albatross, but as an asset. So we rent out most of the building. Those rentals provide 1/3 of our current budget. I'm sad I'm not going to hear the tax person, but all of our rentals go to our foundation, to our White Rock UMC Foundation that was created in the 50s. And then they give us grants to help us with our budget. So we have 4 primary partnerships that provide the bulk of that rental income. One is the preschool, the Children's Center preschool, that gives us $10,000 a month. Um, and 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 the hard part of that is that they have a 10-year contract, a 10-year lease. And so when I came, there was no dedicated nursery space, and we had just hired a children's minister, and we needed more space that was able to be used by the church. And so that has been a struggle. And so that's something to be aware of. Do you enter into a lease with an organization that it will be collaborative space, or do you do dedicated space? Because hopefully your church will grow. That's the hope. So we are renegotiating their lease. It ends in 2026. So I'm hoping to get some space back. Another partnership that we have is upstairs in our second floor with an art group called Studio Bella that does art camps after school to area schools. And they do summer camps. So in the school year, we have the preschool. In the summer, we have the art camps. And so really the church doesn't have any downtime where we can turn off the AC and sort of shut down the building. Everything's always running all the time. They pay us $3,600 a month to really have their office space,
Yeah.
and to have after school care, to do everything like that. We have
Wow.
a commercial kitchen that we rent out to sort of like as an incubator for chefs. And that is amazing. I'll walk into the building and it'll smell like granola. It's a little dangerous, but that's really cool. We've had a couple chefs that have left because they've been able to save enough that they can have their own storefront, which is really cool to be a part of that. And then we have artists that rent our Sunday school spaces that were in the basement. And that has just been all, those were sort of all in place when I got there. That was a lot of trial and error, a lot of, that they would work really hard to get to a place where they thought a group was moving in, and then it would fall through.
I just want to
So
tell them that.
So I talked to Scott Bontrager, who's the pastor at First Methodist Church Garland, because he came, their preschool had closed during COVID. They had all this empty space. And now the church is full again. And I said, what have y'all done? And he said, it was all organic. It was all people who knew people through networking. So all the people who are now using the facility knew someone, in the church leadership that were able to say, hey, we have a space that you could use. So I was like, well, I don't know if that will help this group or not, but just spreading the word that your church has space seems to have worked, at least up here in North Texas. We also have some Zen Buddhists that have a meditation room, and they use the space on the evenings and Saturdays. And so that's really cool.
There's
Whenever I
57
am
people
really
there.
stressed
Yes.
with the church, I can be like, okay, I'm going to go to the Zen Buddhist room and go sit for a while. And then we also have a micro school. It's just like 8 kids. So there's so much going on at the church, which is wonderful. But it also means that I'm a landlord because it's an old building and there's always something going wrong. The HVAC system is always trouble. We have a big chiller. There's just always something going wrong. And so it's really stressful. We have a maintenance person, but I feel like he and I work together a lot of times. We have an admin who is supposed to run point. But it feels like I have a congregation on Sunday and then I have a congregation during the week. And somebody's always upset about something. So it's a lot of work. But if we didn't do this, the church couldn't be. I mean, 1/3 of our budget comes from these rentals. In 2017, White Rock also took over a church that had closed, a Methodist church that had closed, that was right next door to a school that had 600 kids. And that is called Owenwood. And so White Rock owns that 7.2, well, the conference, but White Rock owns that 7.2 acres that Owenwood Farm and Neighbor Space has. And so that has been interesting as well, to see how they have utilized their property. So I'm on the board of that nonprofit now, as of this January, a separate nonprofit. And they got their EIN and nonprofit designation through the United Methodist Group ruling. If you have any questions about that, I did all that, so I'm happy to answer offline. But they, rent out their space to a farm. They rent out their space to an ESL program. They rent out their space to a group that helps special needs adults during the week. They rent out their space to a yoga studio. They rent out their space to a church on Sunday mornings. White Rock had a church there on Wednesday evenings called Dinner Church, but COVID really killed that. And we haven't started back up. So that is also on my plate. Once I talk about all the things, I realize why I'm so tired. But it's really exciting. It's really cool. Sometimes I feel like I'm back in my hospital chaplain days. Because I've got the church people, I've got the community partners, I've got all the people that come to the community partner events, through the doors. So there's a lot of doors of people coming to the church. And just, how can I be a pastor to all those people and how can I invite them into the life of the church? We also have 2 neighborhood groups that surround us. And so they consider the church a part of what they do. And we also host the farmers market on Saturdays in our parking lot. That is so easy. We don't do anything. We open a door on Saturdays through our door lock computer system for people to use the bathroom, and they pay us $500 a month for them to use our parking lot. So that's a great thing. It's called Good Local Markets. I don't know if they're in the Houston area or not, but it's just all the ways. How can we provide revenue so that the church can continue to be a place of worship, but also a place for the community? We host lots of AA groups, CODA, Codependence Anonymous groups. We let the Catholics who are next door use our parking lot, but they also pay us $500 a month. So it's really exciting to see, how we as a church can sort of think in a different way than I have previously as a pastor. So
Kerry, I have a
I've talked a lot.
question.
Yes,
So do you have lease agreements, rental agreements with each entity?
we do. We do.
And did an attorney, or how did you come up with those lease agreements?
Yes, we had. It's pretty obvious that they had three attorneys when I look at the leases. So we're trying to get them all to be standard because the first lease was for 10 years for that preschool. And so that lease is like 26 pages, which is a lot. So the ones that we've been doing with our artists and the people who rent like a room, we're trying to get down to like 3 pages, just because it's so copious. So we now have a lawyer on our leadership board who is willing to help us for free. So that has he and I are like, okay, how can we get these leases to be more boilerplate standard things?
And the farm and neighbor space, that's its
Mm-hmm.
own 501(c)(3). That's not.
Yes, yeah, yes. The church owns the land and the church building, and then this separate. And White Rock started Owenwood Farm and Neighbor Space, but they were having trouble getting grants being tied to a church. So the decision was made to help them sort of branch out as a separate 501(c)(3). Yeah.
So when you went through the each one, and you mentioned, maybe this one gives $12,000 a month, or 3,600 a month, or 500 a month. So fully a third of y'all's budget, which is a couple $100,000 that y'all
Our budget is
generate.
is $850,000. So I think it was like almost 300,000 or 250. I meant to
Okay,
do that. What's a third of 850?
that's really good. Yeah, close. Not quite 300, but close. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Someone in chat asked a question.
Mhm.
Uh, are you able to share the lease agreements, or is that not
Sure.
possible?
Yes, definitely. My email is krumc.org. I could put it in the chat.
If you don't mind, that'd
I'll
be
try to
fantastic.
I'll try to do three things at once. I'll
Okay.
send you the shorter ones for our artists, just because it seems like that's better.
And
My
how
lawyer,
did you get the word out that you had available
they
space?
Yes, when White Rock first sort of did this, there was a lot of press. So if you search like White Rock UMC, the mix, our basement area where the artists use the space is called the mix. And so there was a lot of press around that. So I think that helped. Just letting people know that you're available if you can get any press. And then we get calls still today from that, letting your neighborhood groups, letting the next door groups know that you're available, finding out how much your square footage is helpful, finding out what office space rents for in your community so that you can know, this is how much office space in the community rents for. We're providing Wi-Fi and janitorial service and bathrooms and, some kitchen space. And so, it's like an office, is a helpful starting point. So,
All right. Thank you. There's a couple other questions. What impact on insurance did renting out all of these to third parties have?
it's really interesting being a church getting insurance in Texas, isn't it? So the insurance company has told me they want to know how much of our total square footage is dedicated space that the church can't use. Um, if it's collaborative space and the church can use it, then they don't care about that. But the dedicated space, they want to know what percentage it is of our total square footage, if that makes sense. So like our total square footage, I think is 65,000 or 75,000. And then like, I think I said that our dedicated space that we cannot access, we cannot use is like 20. So then they charged us something for that, but it wasn't that much. And then everyone who rents our space has to have insurance, sort of like renter's insurance, and we have to be named on that policy. And the insurance company has been really helpful to tell me what they require. And then, it's up to us to sort of do that once a year or whenever new people come.
Someone asked, thank you, Kerry, are the leases net leases or gross leases?
I mean, they're paid to our foundation, and
Okay.
then the foundation makes grants to us. So I mean, we're not taking out taxes or anything. We're not paying. It's not affecting the way that that's set up. It's not what I've been told is it's not affecting our tax status.
Okay.
So I think net, gross. I'm horrible.
Okay. Uh, so for a church that is starting or looking at doing something, renting out some of their space to a community group, do you have words of wisdom? Something that you would share as starting out?
Yeah, I think it's all about relationships, as we know in churches. So, making sure that it's a group that you feel comfortable with. Will they have shared space? Will you be able to access the space, or will it be dedicated space to them and you really can't access it? Will they have 24-hour access? Will they have access during the business hours? So, just having a conversation about what their needs are and what the church can provide is helpful. And then sort of saying what is, are they a nonprofit, are they a for-profit, what is their capability, and then finding out how much square footage they'll be using, knowing how much square footage is going for office space in your community, so that you sort of have a starting point. So is it 10 cents a square foot, is it 50 cents a square foot, and then okay, well, this is sort of where we are in our community, and so this is what sort of we can ask people to we can ask people to pay as
Sure.
community partners.
And their utilities are all included in that rental fee.
Right. And I when I got to White Rock, we pay Spectrum and AT&T for internet. And I was like, why are we paying two companies? Well, when you say that you have internet, you have to have something for if one of them goes down. So there's some sort of technical thing that, like, if Spectrum goes down, then it goes to AT&T. And I was like, that is insanity. But I guess when people need internet, so it can't go down.
Okay, that's helpful. Are there other questions for Kerry in the chat?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Monty says net equals tenant pays a part of the church's expenses based on their square footage. We do we don't. What we have done is when I got to the church, we were providing janitorial service for the third floor or second floor art camps, and it was killing us, and we just didn't have the people to do that. And so when we renegotiated, we are learning to just do 1 year leases so that we can renegotiate if things are too much or whatever. So I said the church can continue to clean the common space, the hallway, and the bathroom, but we cannot clean your individual rooms. It's too much for the church to do. And so that helped us to say, we'll keep the money the same, but we can't provide the same level of service.
Okay, that's very helpful to know. And they empty out their own trash, or they do their own office or
Right.
space.
We have a big on that second floor, we have a big like dumpster thing, but it's nice. But they know that it'll be emptied, every 3 days, but they've got to take the trash to that place.
Okay. And do you see people coming and being a part of the church as a result of the relationship that the church has with the space?
I mean, I think that the people who use the space consider the church, White Rock, their church, even if they don't come on Sundays.
Sure.
Which, I don't know if that's good or bad, but they consider it their church.
Right.
And I would say I have been at churches before where the preschool was seen as sort of like a big, okay, we'll get people into the church from their preschool. And so I was concerned, and the preschool had always been a ministry of the church. And so when I got to White Rock, they're renters. It's not a ministry of. But we've had 2 or 3 families come to the church from the preschool, and my only interaction with the preschool, I don't do weekly chapel. because it's not a Christian school, it's not a Methodist school. I greet people on the first day of school. That's all I do. I stand outside for 30 minutes. But still, I think because it's in the same building as the church, people think that it is associated with the church.
Sure.
So I think that we've brought in as many people as we might have normally. And like if these were ministries of instead of
Right.
renting the space.
Okay. Well, that's very helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Kerry, for sharing with us.
Yeah.
And
And
thank you for
if
sharing your
anyone's ever
email.
yeah. And if anyone's ever up in Dallas, I'm happy to give a tour. I think I gave a tour of some people from Katy, from St. Peter's maybe, and Katy
Could be.
maybe.
Yes. We have a St.
Like
Peter's in Katy. Yes.
yeah, yeah. So I'm
Okay.
happy to help. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much. And I know that you have to go to your child's Eagle Scout ceremony. So that's great. Yes, my son's an Eagle Scout, so it's a big deal. So y'all enjoy, have a great evening. So thank you for being here with us this
Thank
evening.
you. And thank you so much for everyone's ministry. You are making such a difference in the world, and you can do it every day. You got it.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, we're going to say goodbye to Kerry, and we're going to welcome our two Matts, Matt Austin and Matt Patrick, with co-pastors of University UMC in Tulsa. And so I am looking on the screen to see Matt or Matt. Matt Patrick, I see you on the screen. I see your name. There you are. Welcome, Matt.
Turn this off.
Hey, good afternoon or good evening.
Good evening. Are we early, late?
You're right on time. We are glad that I see you both are here on the same screen. There you are. Well, hello, Matt
Matt
Patrick.
Austin.
Okay. Hello, Matt Austin. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
And Matt Patrick is there somewhere. I just saw him.
He went to go get something off the printer, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Fantastic.
I'm back. I'm back. We're running from meeting to meeting.
Well, we are glad that you've made some time for us in the Texas conference. Some of us are having some crazy weather this evening. I know that y'all have had quite a bit of crazy weather in Oklahoma. So are y'all doing okay?
We're doing okay. It's not been a fun couple weeks, but we're here. Church is still standing.
I'm glad the church is still standing. I talked to my cousin last night. He's up in Oklahoma as well, and they were almost blown away, but they're doing fine as well. So thank y'all for being here. Share with us. We've assembled together, and share with us about your ministry of leasing your building there in Tulsa at University UMC. Just share with us.
Absolutely. Well, we'll kind of give you a little bit of background of how we kind of got started doing this and why we are doing it here at university. So Matt and I, we were both trained as church planters. We come out of a church planting little group. You all know Path One very well, I'm sure. But we are both trained as church planters through the Path One residency program. And we were both appointed to two different churches. Matt was appointed to a church in Oklahoma City, a rather large church, and I was appointed to a church plant that I had been working at for about a decade. And when it came to the time to start planting a church, we both of the churches we were at quickly realized that they weren't in the position to plant a church. So Matt and I were tasked with trying to figure out how to use the training of church planting and what to do with that. And so we started going around asking questions, talking to people, and we had a little bout of inspiration while we were at a church conference down in Florida called Exponential Church Conference. And we talked to a man there named Mark DeMoz, who is he was a church planter in Little Rock, Texas. And he started a church in a old Kmart strip center, and he used part of the building to help fund the ministry of his church by starting a gym in that building. And we just thought that was so creative. That was a clever way to do church. And we just started talking to him. And that's where we kind of got this inspiration of, well, what if we could plant a church while also starting a business or creating some sort of alternate income venture to fund that ministry and supplement the offering plate, because it became clear to us, and I'm sure to most of you, that the offering plate alone, it just isn't going to cut it anymore. And so we started looking at churches throughout Oklahoma and in Tulsa, and with our cabinet and the help of the DS in this area, we identified University United Methodist Church, and they said, okay, try it out here and let's see what you can do. So Matt, you want to tell them like the university and what it was like when we got here?
Yeah. So University United Methodist Church, it's 102 years old. It is on the campus of the University of Tulsa. It's a Division I school. It's actually, I think at one point it was the smallest Division I school, NCAA Division I school. But so we're right here on campus. It's 100 years old. Most of the land that the university owns was actually once owned by the United Methodist Church and owned by our church. And so kind of, over the last 100 years, it was subsumed by the university as the university grew and the church did not. And so when Matt and I got here, we were appointed here in the spring of 2020. Really started, first day was the last week of June in 2020, and we were right in the middle of the pandemic. They had not been worshiping in 3 months. And when we got here, the treasurer basically said, one of our salaries was paid for by the conference. That just so all this makes sense. But we got there and the treasurer told us that we had about 15 months cash on hand and then we would be insolvent. And Matt and I were only given a year to prove this concept out. And so we were on a short deadline. And so we got to work. And what we basically told the church is we said, look, people were saying, hey, what new ministries are we going to start? What new things are we going to do? We said, we're not doing anything. We're not going to do anything until we can pay the bills. You guys have 15 months of cash at the current burn rate. They were running about an $80,000 annual deficit on about a $250,000 budget. That's really bad. And I was like, Matt and I were like, we have to fix that. We have to fix that first, and then we can move into some of this other stuff because we're also excited about that. And so the first thing we had to do was convince the church of a vision of this kind of alternate income model. We call it the alternate income model. I don't know what you all call it down in Texas, but that's what we call it here. And we got to talking to the church about it, got them on board. It's a very long story. Don't have time for it today, but got them on board. And we started with one of two businesses. There are two businesses now owned by the church. The first is Propel Business and Event Center, which is actually not that is not a legal entity that exists. It's really just a brand. So we started a business and event center because we have 60,000 square feet here and almost none of it was being used by the church. Most of it was floor to ceiling storage of just kind of junk. And so we cleared all that out and we started a business and event center, commercial office rental, event space rental. And it was very important that we branded it away from the church. That's kind of a key thing we've learned over the last 4 years is we branded it away from the church. We got a grant to renovate the space. And as we sit here today, that's at 100% occupancy. We don't have open space here anymore. And in the first year, it cut the deficit in half. And in the second year, we broke even. So we went from basically financial collapse to financial health. And now we have to hire like 8 new people. And so it's maybe going to be kind of a wibble wobble back and forth. But it's really brought the church out of its financial crisis. And so that was the first of 2 businesses that we started.
And we started with event rental space and renting because that's kind of the low-hanging fruit that most churches have.
Right.
We've got a lot of churches in Oklahoma, and I know you do in Texas, a lot of old buildings that are large and being vastly underused.
Yeah.
And so it is the easiest thing that you can think of to do is to use that space. And so we decided to rent it. And we viewed it very quickly realized that one of the advantages that the church has is that we do care about our communities. And when we were able to tell people that the rent that they were paying wasn't just going into somebody's pocket, it was going back into the communities that they already care about, that was a huge selling point that we knew was a thing, but we vastly underestimated how important that was to our community. And so we filled up very quickly.
Yeah,
no.
We filled up.
So can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Oh, please.
So the event center, is it office space or is it like for events, like a reception or a venue?
It's both.
Okay.
Primarily, we rent out office space. So we have 3 floors and a basement, and 2 of those floors and most of the basement are all rented out to tenants. And the question we get most of the time is, oh, are these like nonprofits? Are they church-related businesses? We love those, but that wasn't our primary goal when we decided to rent out to people. We wanted to bring our community inside of our building, and that's how we did it here.
So like an insurance company or an attorney's office, or it doesn't matter?
Yeah. So one of the rules we have is it has to be community positive, right? So we don't lease to predatory payday loaners. We don't lease to dispensaries. Think what you will on that, but we don't do things like that. It has to be community positive. So we have like a music school on the 3rd floor. Our whole 2nd floor at one point was rented out by
Housing Solutions.
Housing Solutions Tulsa, which work with the homeless, and they actually got such a large federal grant they had to double their staff, and they outgrew us, so they had to leave because they outgrew us.
We filled the space in about a month.
Yeah, it took us about a month, and we filled. They were leasing 3,000 square feet from us, multiple rooms, and we leased out after they left in about a month. We've got a executive business coach. There's a guy running for office.
A calligraphy company that does wedding calligraphy.
Yeah. So just kind of all sorts of stuff. And we take it on a case-by-case basis. We found it's not a good idea to really have a policy that's like very strict, but instead you take each tenant on a case-by-case basis.
And our administrative council at our church gets to decide who gets to rent from us and who doesn't. We bring all applications through them.
Is the rate per square foot the same for everyone, or does it vary?
It's the same.
10 cents per square foot per year.
It's a little bit cheaper than our surrounding area.
Okay.
A lot of people in the church want to come in a lot lower than the surrounding community, but we found that that's just not necessary.
No.
And do y'all provide internet and utilities and cleaning, maintenance and janitorial services as well?
Yes, we do. And that kind of leads into our next little point is we realized very quickly, Matt and I couldn't handle all of that on our own. That's one of those things. We say it a lot. They don't teach you that in seminary. They definitely don't teach you how to do that in seminary.
But we've learned.
We've learned a lot. But we realized very quickly that we needed help. And we needed somebody that had those skills. And so we just started praying and getting out in the community and meeting people. When Paul goes into a community, he said you want to find that person of peace, that person that welcomes you into their house. And that's where you can start and establish your ministry. We just started praying very intentionally about finding that person of peace who could help us not only manage our building, but connect us with the community. Matt and I are from this area, but we had been in Oklahoma City for about a decade. And so we needed that person that could connect us with the TU community. And we went across the street to an elementary school, and the secretary at that elementary school said she was quitting that job and wanted to look at renting space from us. And when we started telling her about what we were doing, she got really excited and said the Holy Spirit was leading her to get involved. And so in exchange for her rental space, a discount for her rental space, she offices here and gives us work managing the tenants here in this property. So we don't have to do any of that. We use the assets that we have, which is our space, and traded that for her work.
Wonderful. Okay. So in the chat, there's a couple of questions. Do the units have to be remodeled between the tenant transitions?
You don't have to. One thing I learned about commercial office very quickly, I didn't know anything. Now we know something, but not everything. One thing is it just kind of depends on what the need of the tenant is. We actually turned away a tenant very early in the process because they wanted all these renovations. And my dad took me aside. He was like, "No, you messed up. That's not what you do." He said, "What you do is you quote the renovations, say they're 15 grand of renovations. They sign a 5-year lease, and you break up the $15,000 and divide it by 60 and add it to their monthly rent." He's like, "That's a pretty standard practice in commercial office rental." He knows that because he's smarter. And so we have taken that same approach here.
Now, we have some tenants that they're looking for a very cheap space and they don't care what it looks like. Our basement, I thought it was unrentable.
I still think it is.
There was literally a bat flying around in our basement.
It's true.
And it's not great. It doesn't heat well. It doesn't cool well. We're on a 75-year-old boiler chiller system. I would not want to rent that space, but we had somebody that came in, and for a very cheap price, they were willing to do some cheap little renovations in there, and they made it look very nice, and they wanted to rent it. So we were able to do that. And we have some other people that wanted some more bigger renovations done, and we were able to do that. But most people just want it as is, with just maybe a new coat of paint and some new carpet, and that's about it.
Sure. And do the leases vary in the number of months, like 12 months, 5 years?
It's all up to the tenant and what we negotiate with them.
Yeah, one thing we don't do, we typically don't do month to month. It's just you don't get high quality tenants on month to month stuff. We do a year. Year is pretty standard, but we have signed 5-year tenant leases before. And what's good about the 5-year lease is we actually signed a 5-year lease with Housing Solutions, who outgrew us. And 2 years in, they were like, "We got to leave." And we were like, "Okay, well, you signed a 5-year lease, but let's negotiate an exit." And so they didn't have to pay out the remainder of their lease, but they did pay out basically an agreement with us to exit. And so built into our leases is a process that if you want to exit early, you can engage us to negotiate some kind of exit. They were helping the homeless. So we said, pay out the rest of the calendar year and we'll call it.
They became a great partner of ours. We get a lot of people coming in asking for assistance, and we were able to direct them to somebody that could help them a lot better than we could. We built a really great community connection here with that tenant.
Wonderful. So are the renters able to access the building 24 hours?
Yes, they are. Sir. We have, let me grab my keys for you. When we started this, we had to get these old key fobs. We installed a key fob system throughout our building, which allows us to have controlled access at any different time for any different fob. You can customize it completely. And it allows us to go back and see who has been in the building and when they were here.
So are there any security issues that y'all run into?
Yes.
Define security issue, right?
Yes. I would be lying to you if I said, "Oh, no, it's been absolutely smooth and there's been no issues." Nothing's been bad, but anytime you try to do something new, there's going to be hiccups. Churches aren't used to doing this. And we had some people who were hesitant to open their building to tenants and have people in the building all hours of the day. But, when a problem comes, we solve it as it gets here. And so we didn't want to try to pick every little problem and fix it beforehand. And we've been just fine. We've really had no major issues. We've been able to solve most of them.
That's probably like the number one thing I think is like a takeaway is Matt and I kind of live by this motto. I learned from an Air Force colonel who said a perfect plan never gets executed, but it's better to do an okay plan today than a perfect plan that never gets done or never has anything going with it. And what we've kind of learned is you cannot predict problems. It's impossible almost. And you can actually get caught up trying to solve problems and predict what they're going to be, when the best thing you can do is do the best you can to mitigate problems at the outset and then solve them one by one as you get into it. And that is true with the second business that we did as well, which is Double Flag Coffee Company. That we decided pretty early on that there was only a certain amount of square footage in the building, and that would cap out income for the church. And
we know what we can get.
We know what we can get. And so we decided to start another company that could give its profits back to the church. And so we founded Double Flag Coffee Company, and that was a couple of years ago.
It's a little bit, not a little bit, it's a lot riskier business. It's a lot riskier to start a business, but the ceiling of income is a lot higher.
So tell us about the coffee business.
Yeah, so basically it's a 20-foot coffee trailer. Originally we wanted to do like a hut outside, and then we were convinced, rightly so, that a trailer would be more versatile and allow us more business. The very first thing we did is this. Churches love to do things like this, like start a coffee trailer. You know, those are things that are very important. This is a very important bit. If you're going to start a church-owned business, you have to run it like a business. If you try and focus on a bunch of other things, the business will fail. And so we treated it like a business, which is where we focused on one thing founding the business, the product. The product was the most important thing. It had to be good. The coffee had to taste good. We spent a lot of time on that to the point where we were confident we'd put it up against any other coffee place in Tulsa. And we did it mobily. So we founded that as an LLC. So that actually does legally exist. Double Flag Coffee Company is an LLC. Its board of governors is made up, the only body, according to its governing document, the only body allowed to appoint the board of governors for Double Flag Coffee Company is the administrative council of this church. So they can appoint, and it's the sole proprietor of the LLC. So our church is the sole owner of the company. That was really important.
In Oklahoma, it is very easy to start an LLC.
Yeah, it's kind of silly.
You don't even need to have a person named as the proprietor of the business. You can have an entity. So we were able to say the church is the entity that owns the business, which is great because it takes the liability away from an individual. And you never want that when you're dealing with a church in a business.
So we started the coffee company. We went into the first year. Coffee's great. We were doing events. We don't really know. It's like, yeah, it's going okay. And then we started trying to reach out and get some more events. And then we kind of struck gold. We applied for the Tulsa State Fair. And we got an email from a group called ExpoServe, who does all of the food for the Tulsa County Fairground. They're the business, and they do a bunch, like the BOK Center, like the big concert arena downtown. And they invited us to a meeting. The president and CEO of that company invited Matt and I to a meeting, and we went in there, and I'll never forget this. He looked at us and he said, we like your trailer. He said, how big do you want this company to be? And I said, very, very big, please, sir. Thank you. That would be awesome. And so he said, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to make you the sole coffee vendor for the Tulsa County Fairground as soon as you can start. And so the trailer's out there right now. Doing it. We're booked 150 to 200 days a year out at the fairground.
Our primary business is horse shows.
Yeah.
And agriculture shows. So you'll see pictures on the internet of people getting coffee on horseback. I don't know if you've ever seen that before, but it's pretty cool.
We call it ride through coffee instead of drive through. And so that really made the business take off. We were able to hire a full-time general manager who now manages it. So Matt and I, about 2 years ago, 70% of Matt and I's energy, we're trying to get that business off the ground. And now it's like 5% of our energy because we have a full-time manager. And it's going really well. We're looking probably, it'll end up being $125,000 to $175,000 in revenue this year, on probably a 40 to 50% profit margin.
Coffee has a great profit margin.
Yeah, huge profit margins, and all those profits will go back into the church. And I saw somebody ask all the typical questions we get when we do this stuff. I can answer any of those.
But before we started any of this, we got legal representation, and so our districts, you have it as well. We have chancellors that are both district chancellors, and then we have conference chancellors. And so we utilized our chancellors and made sure that we were getting sound legal advice so that we weren't making any giant mistakes.
And CPAs.
Yes.
CPAs were very important in that as well. And one thing we wanted to add to this as well is the effect on our church has been tremendous. When Matt and I got to this church, they were worshiping 40 to 45 on a Sunday. We are now averaging between 80 and 90. High Sundays have us well over 100. Easter, we had about 175 on Easter. And so the church's worship attendance has doubled over the last few years. And it's just brought this kind of new energy to the church. A lot of young people joining our church because they're excited, because they have multiple ways they can get involved in mission. They can volunteer in the coffee trailer. They can do all sorts of things that allow them to engage
the mindset we kind of took with this. You know that old phrase, if you build it, they will come?
Yes.
You know, we took the mindset that if you fill it, then they will come. People used to walk by our building and not even know that it was a church. They didn't know what was going on. They thought it was an old building that TU had bought. Now when people walk by our building, it's full of people. I don't even know who's in our building right now. There's people in and out all day, every single day. And so when somebody walks by, they know something's going on there. And we were betting on the fact that if we fill this building with people, our worship service is going to grow, because people are going to want to see what's happening. And it's turned out to be true. People just want to come and see what's happening at the church now.
And so the kind of the key piece here is I just want to make sure we get through the end of this. This last piece is now Matt and I are halftime at this church, and our other part of our appointment is we're the directors of what we call the Office of Research and Innovation. That's through the district office. So we answer to the district superintendent, and we're helping other churches embrace this model. In fact, we have another campus of Propel Business and Event Center opening at another United Methodist church just down the street. And they're going to do similar things. So it's now our job to coach and consult churches and pastors on how to do this well. And we kind of see it as the United Methodist Church has this massive competitive differential advantage in our property holdings. We just have all these pieces of property. They're massive. In the 60s, we just built all this square footage. And now that it's declining, people see it as kind of this millstone around our neck. And that's just not how we should see it. We actually should see it as our main advantage to leverage for our future. And that's kind of the vision we have for that. But we'll be more than glad to take any questions.
It allows us to live into the connection that we are, that is the bread and butter of the United Methodist Church. We are connected and we are one. And so when we're able to have somebody come into our building looking for office space and say, well, we're full, but Memorial Drive down the road, that's the other Propel space. You can go down there and see what office space they have. And so we envision this as being something that, becomes a thing in Tulsa, where Propel office and event space is all around Tulsa and all of our Methodist churches.
Hey, Mark.
Yeah. Just a quick question. Guys, that's a really cool story on that coffee company. That's something else, man.
Thanks, Mark.
Now it's a separate LLC. So you said the profits from the coffee company go back as donations to the church, right? Yeah. So the LLC doesn't pay taxes. Is that right?
This is where we're figuring all of that out now. We ran into a big issue with the way our church is named. We've had some issues paying our taxes. We're trying to give the government money and they're not letting us.
The quick answer is we've decided to pay taxes to pay and not to claim that as charitable giving, because we felt that was kind of cheating. So we decided we're going to pay the 21% federal corporate rate. And I don't know if Texas has a state income tax or a corporate tax, but Oklahoma does. It's like 4 or 5%. So we decided that we're going to pay taxes. And but right now the government won't let us because they don't think our church legally exists because we haven't filed anything with the IRS in 100 years. So we're having issues figuring that out right now.
Turns out when you merge churches and become the United Methodist Church, but you don't change your name with the government, you run into some issues.
Got it.
That's an excellent question, though. That's one we get a lot.
Yes, thank you, Mark. We're about out of time. If we had persons that wanted to email you, could they do that? They had questions.
Matt's going to type our email down in the chat so that you can do it. We have a shared email. It's themats@uumctulsa.org. So if you email us, you can get both of us. Okay,
great. And property tax exemption, somebody asked.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the IRS, here's what people will tell you. You'll see articles that say once you reach 10% of your income, or 20% of your income, or 50% of your income. Now, I think there might be a CPA in here. This is what we have found, is that the tax code's very vague on a lot of this stuff, and a lot of it's none of it's ever been litigated. At least our attorneys and our CPAs really couldn't get firm answers on what that percentage is. what we kind of decided was that it was okay to just go ahead and start doing this and not worry about the tax exemption so much. And one of the reasons for that is we felt if we did this correctly, who cares if they take our tax exemption? I mean, we'll be still financially better off than if we weren't, and they probably won't take our tax exemption because the rules are somewhat vague anyway, and they're actually not vague on the rental of space. There's a lot of precedent for churches renting out what the IRS calls real property, but there are some tax implications on other things. So like the unrelated business income tax, the UBIT. I'm sure somebody's going to talk about that.
Yes,
that's really
that's
important.
what we're about to talk about.
Yes, that's really important. So make sure you talk to a CPA, talk to attorneys to get answers for yourselves because it's a case by case kind of thing.
So Matt Austin, Matt Patrick, thank you so very much for taking your time out to meet with us. And this is very exciting. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having us.
We are going to move to our accountant, Ashley Voss, to come onto the screen and answer questions about the unrelated business income tax. And so, Ashley, I see you, Matt, and Matt, thank y'all so very much. We appreciate you.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Great.
Greetings, Ashley. We're glad that you're here.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, it was a great segue. The last question was about taxes. And so take it from there.
Absolutely. And in interest of time, does this thing automatically end at 6:40 or can we go further if we need to? Since I'm starting a little late. Okay.
Yes, we can go further.
I didn't know if I'm going to get cut off right in the middle of my biggest point. So I say all my biggest points early, right?
Yeah, just go ahead, Ashley.
Okay.
You got
and
the
then
floor.
I'm assuming you've handed all the. I came on a little early. I'm so glad I heard the Matts. That was not only inspiring but very informative, and does certainly gives me a good kind of background or even some guidance to the audience and what I should direct. So let me jump into this. I know we don't have a lot of time. I'm calling this a mini session. So I'm covering the unrelated business income aspect of this session from a CPA's perspective. This is typically a session I would do in an hour to an hour and a half. So to really cover it well. And even then, it's hard to cover it all because, as the Matts even said, it really gets nuanced and you need to speak to an attorney and to a CPA to really kind of talk to your situation. So there is a disclaimer on this in the sense of make sure if you're really interested in exploring this, don't just take what you've heard from me, and I would even say from every other speaker, because everyone's situation is a little different. And but that was a great kind of segue in giving us an example and a large part of what I'm going to talk about in the next few minutes here. So I've got about a 20-minute session. I'm going to narrow that down at this point down to probably 18 minutes even at this point. So just a brief introduction. Who is this guy? Why am I even talking about this? So I'm a CPA. I work with the Texas Annual Conference. I work with a number of Methodist churches, maybe you as well. So I'm the owner and CPA for Ratliff and Associates. We're a firm in Texas. We work only with nonprofits, most of whom are churches. So we like being a small part of what you guys are doing on the front lines of ministry. And happy to help. If you have further questions, you're welcome to email me. I'm sure Robert or Mark or others can give you my contact information, or you can just look us up on the internet too and reach us that way. So it's Ratliff CPA. Ratliff.cpa is kind of our simple website, but you can find us other ways or look up my name. I think you can find us that way too. But I do have a handout, like a little 2-page I wrote up just for this session. So if you'd like that, I can pass that on for distribution, or you can contact me directly. Okay. But I'm going to let Robert, I guess, handle questions if those come in, kind of interrupt me.
Yep. That'll be fine. I'm going to put your email in the chat. Okay. Or your website.
Yeah. So contact me if you want my handout, because I'm not going to really present that on this session because it's just so short. I thought you'd do best just to hear from me and kind of think through some of the things that I'm going to point out. So I'm going to hit just the highlights of unrelated business income as it relates to churches. I will condense that into the acronym UB because I sometimes fumble over the phrase unrelated business income, and I'm going to say that about 100 more times. So I will say UB. If we're talking about the tax aspect of it, it's UBIT. Okay, so there's can be unrelated business income, but it's not always taxable. So there's all these kind of unique aspects to that. But that's what we're specifically going to talk to, and particularly two types of UB that are most common to churches. One is rental income, which we just heard a great story about, and the other is going to be sales income. So I'm going to talk briefly to each one of those. But first, you got to understand what is unrelated business income. We build this on a stool. If you think about a stool you might sit on, a three-legged stool, and all three legs have to be present for it to be UB. If one of the legs is not present, it's not UB, and it's generally not a taxable issue. If it is the three-legged stool and is taxable, then you have to consider if there is in fact tax owed. There's often exceptions, though, to that rule. So the three legs are unrelated, it's a business, and that it's regularly conducted. So think first unrelated. That means it's not related to your exempt purpose. Okay, what is your exempt purpose? That's important for you to know first, is what are you, in fact, recognized by the IRS to do? Is it just perform church services, or is it more than that? Maybe it's education as well, if you have a school, or you're thinking about having a school. So the broader your exempt purpose, the larger you can have more related activities you can do. Okay, so is it unrelated? Second, is it a trade or business? Is it the type of thing that normally we would think of as a business type activity? This also distinguishes it from donations. So if it's donation revenue, it's not UB. Okay, so we're talking about what we call exchange transactions, sales, fees, revenues. And third, is it regularly carried on? Now that is going to be relative to the type of activity. If it's something normally that you carry on regularly throughout the week, then you're going to use a certain kind of test. But if it's more of a holiday type activity, I know some of you might sell pumpkins or fireworks. If you only do that once a year, that would still be considered regularly carried on because it's a holiday activity that only gets carried on once or twice a year anyway, right? Like Christmas tree sales, same idea. It's not regularly carried on. It'll be just in that season. Okay, so unrelated, it's a business type activity and it's regularly carried on. That's the stool that all three have to be present to be considered UB. Now, a couple myths that I'm going to try to dispel, and I don't have enough time to go through all of these, so I'm going to speed through and just hit the highlights. But one thing that I often hear is that if we generate UB, we're going to lose our tax exempt status. That's not true. Now, you can lose your tax exempt status for a lot of reasons, but just because you have unrelated to business income does not mean that you're going to lose your tax status. The other is that sales tax, property tax, unrelated business income tax, these are all the same. They are not, okay? They are all very different. Each has its own rules. So don't confuse a discussion about UB with property tax matters or sales tax matters, okay? Totally different. Let's see what else I want to cover. If we have just a little bit of unrelated business income, nobody's going to care. Well, the IRS says anything over $1,000 gross. That's before you subtract expenses. That's a pretty low threshold. So if you've got only $1,000 or more of unrelated business income, you've got to consider the possibility of filing a form with the IRS, which is called 990T. 990T is what is used to report unrelated business income to the IRS. Don't let that confuse you with Form 990. Some of you may have heard of 990. That's what what nonprofits file to the IRS. Everyone but churches, if you know that that's the exception. Churches are the only ones that don't have to file with the IRS, and that form is called 990. So 990T is reserved for the unrelated business income tax, if that comes up. Oh, and last thing, that's a myth. How you use that money is what determines if it's UB. In other words, if you're using it for your programs, for your ministries, then the revenue would not be unrelated business income. That's not true. That's a myth. It's how the revenue is generated that determines whether or not it's unrelated business income. So don't get confused with how you're spending it. Hopefully, you're spending all your funds for ministry purposes. It's how the money's coming in the door. That's what determines if it's unrelated business income. Okay, so a few myths and general rules to consider. So let's jump into what is rental income and how certain key things to think about in that case. Okay, and this would be good that we just came off some discussions about rental income. So I would say, is the activity truly unrelated to your purpose? If you are renting space to other churches, maybe a Christian school that's a nonprofit, or to other nonprofits that are similar in purpose, it might be related to you. So just because you're renting space and generating rental income doesn't mean that it is unrelated business income if it's related, if their purposes are related to what yours are. Okay, so first think about that. A Christian school or another church is a great example of items that are not unrelated to you. However, if an individual or a company rents space, kind of like the examples we just heard, those would be more likely be unrelated business income. The next thing we do is look and see if you can apply what are called the exceptions. So exceptions to unrelated business income is that there's no debt on the property. And my guess is with a church that's 100 years old, thinking of the stories we just heard, they probably don't have debt on their property. Would love to see what they said to that, but I'm guessing they don't have debt. If you don't have debt on your property, it gives you a lot more flexibility because there's an exception. You don't have unrelated business income if you don't have debt. But if you have debt on the property, then you would have unrelated business income most of the time. Okay, so if you've got debt, especially if you have a new building, or if you've taken out new debt or refinanced, it doesn't matter if you have debt on that property, it's collateralized by the space that you're trying to rent, then you will most likely have unrelated business income. But wait, there's more. There's an exception to the exception, and that's called the 85% more or more test. Okay, the 85% or more test basically says if you're only renting that space periodically, and the majority of that space and time usage, you got to look at both space and time usage, is still for church purposes, then you also are exempt, or I'm sorry, you also have the exception to not have unrelated business income. Okay, so for example, if you're renting space every day of the week to a business, and it's debt financed, that's probably going to be unrelated business income. However, if it's debt financed property, but you're renting it periodically for, say, like an event, for like a family reunion or something, okay? Or for somebody to come use your space for a few times a year, that would probably fit that 85% or more test of that space still being used for church purposes. So lots of nuances to that, just kind of giving you the basic exceptions, but think about what debt is on your property. That's going to be really important to determining whether or not you meet the UB requirement. One last thing, what I call the spicy topic is parking lots. Be careful with parking lots. All kinds of unique rules specific to parking lots. So if you want to use your parking lot, which is often if you're in a city, in a downtown area, this is a huge opportunity, but you might still have to pay some tax. Doesn't mean you can't do it, but just know that there may be some specific requirements around that. Let's move on to sales income. I'm moving as fast as I can, Robert. Tell me if I need to stop. But sales income. Okay, so now we're moving out of rental property. Let's say you just want to sell products. Okay, this is like the coffee shop, which is another great example. First, again, is it really unrelated? Okay, so I like to use the example of the bookstore. If you have a bookstore that sells Bibles, well, Bibles is an extension of your ministry. Selling Bibles or similar type products. That's not considered UB. But if you're selling something like, I don't know, pillows, I'm just going to say something random, then that could be unrelated. But you might have some messaging on that pillow, like if it has a cross or says Jesus loves you and gives some scriptures, you might have a good argument that you're selling products that are extension of your ministry, and therefore it's not unrelated. But if you're selling pictures of puppy dogs and pillows of jewelry with puppy dogs on it, that's probably not really ministry related, right? So you got to think about what types of things you're trying to sell. That's where like the coffee example comes in. Coffee is not really what you do as a ministry, right? So what did they do? They actually created a completely separate company to manage that, which is an option, by the way. If your sales are significant enough for that unrelated activity, there is a consideration to actually create a separate entity, a for-profit entity. That kind of separates it from the church's activities. So you're not having to disclose all the church's activities. You would just report to the IRS that for-profit entity's activities. So that's a good option when you have in fact gone all the way to a good unrelated activity and you know it's going to have a significant revenue stream. But if you just have some few things here and there, you're going to be selling. Here are your exceptions to consider. The most common is for the convenience of members, as we say, or employees or visitors. So this would be like a coffee shop that's only open during church worship hours, Sunday mornings, Sunday nights, Wednesday nights, whenever you meet, or maybe only for a couple hours in the morning for your employees. So if you want to have a coffee shop or cafe or something like that, but you're not open all the time to the public, then you're not really a business that's regularly carried on. Make sense? So you're not generating taxable income in that situation because it's only for the convenience of members and periodic visitors and employees. The other is if it's managed by volunteers. If 85% or more of the activity, the operation is run by volunteers, then it's not an unrelated business income. Good example is like the pumpkin sales or the Christmas tree sales. So you might not meet the regularly conducted test, but if it's all run by volunteers, then that's an exception to unrelated business income. You can just take that income in as you normally would other things. Okay, so volunteers. And then third, if you're selling donated goods. So people donate things to you and then you turn around and sell them. This is kind of the Goodwill example. Then it's not considered unrelated business income. Okay. The coffee shop is the kind of spicy topic on sales income. It's a good example of the kind of thing that can get you into trouble. There are obviously some exceptions to that, but just be careful. Certainly run it by a CPA, run it by an attorney if you really want to go with that type of operation, kind of a full business type operation. Because if it looks, smells, and tastes and sounds like a coffee shop or whatever other business operation you're trying to do, it really might just be that business operation. Doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means you need to be thoughtful of how to meet the requirements for regulatory purposes and to not put yourself in a risky position. Okay. There's your quick overview. Just a few other matters to just put on your to-do list to consider if you're thinking of property tax. Again, is not sales tax. I know the gentleman mentioned this before me, and I'm glad they did because your local tax assessor collector is going to determine what is and is not appropriate. Every city, every county, every state is a little bit different. I encourage you to maybe speak with the local officials, your local city council representative, and you might even say, hey, I know somebody who might be thinking about doing this. If you don't want to name yourself, right? You don't want to get you don't want to put the limelight, on yourself necessarily, but it is helpful to run by those local jurisdictions because they're the ones that have the authority to not only enforce the laws, but to interpret them. And I don't know if you picked up on what the Matt said, it's highly subjective. And there's little precedence on many of these matters at the local level when it comes to local taxes and state taxes. So check those things out, not related to anything that I just talked about. That's a completely different topic, but it gets into that topic. And second is sponsorship income. This is another kind of interesting area if you have sponsorships for certain events, There are some special rules around that. And last is bingo. I know some churches like to do bingo. Bingo is highly regulated, but there are some special rules that allow for it in certain circumstances. So if that's something you're interested in or doing already, be careful with that. Make sure you're familiar with the rules. Robert, I think I hit my time, maybe went over, but I try to be sensitive to that. Any questions, I guess, if there's time?
This is very helpful. Thank you for sharing with us about this. And I guess my takeaway is for any of us that we should be talking to a CPA about any new venture that we would start and just have some clarity upon what the rule is or what the guidelines say.
Yeah, what I recommend, and I skipped over this, is do a pre-checklist. Look at your revenue streams first. What can you identify the different revenue streams that your church currently has? What are the major sources of revenue? Is it just donations? If it's just donations, then you're ready to start exploring other opportunities. If you already have other revenue streams, run those by your CPA if you need to. And if you're thinking about new revenue streams, run those by your CPA or run them by me or an attorney or even one of your friends, other churches who maybe are doing these things. Say, hey, this is what we're thinking about doing. Is this okay? A lot of times, if you'll just tweak the way you're doing things slightly, it will eliminate some issues. So that's or open up new opportunities.
Okay. This is very helpful. Lots of people have asked questions about the unrelated business income. And so having you here tonight and going over that for us, giving an overview has been very helpful. So thank you so very much.
Hey, if I don't mind, I do like to give resources beyond myself too. There's two really great ones that I recommend every church to have on hand, especially if there's any church accountants on the call, or if there's a pastor on the call and you want to give your church accountant a new Christmas present, they'll love this. One is ECFA's resource. If you're not familiar with the ECFA, that's the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability. You don't have to be able to say that, but just look up ecfa.org. They have a resource called the Church and Nonprofit Guide. I highly recommend you pick that up. It's very inexpensive. They used to give it away for free. You can pick up a PDF copy of it tonight if you wanted to. It's easy reading, covers a ton of topics, including this one. The second source for those who are a little more into the details is Richard Hammer's book of Church and Clergy Tax Guide. If you've not heard of Richard Hammer, he is the guru. He's an attorney and a CPA. He has a book about this thick. It goes through all kinds of tax and legal regulations, one of which is unrelated business income. Two of the best sources out there, in addition to just the IRS website. But unfortunately, the IRS website doesn't update some of their materials very often. They do have a webinar on their website, the IRS does. If you want to watch that, it is free and can give you some other background as well. So those are great resources. Again, I can give you my handout too. It's a 2-pager. If you're interested in that, just email me or contact Mark or Robert. We'll figure out how to get it to you.
And Richard Hammer, Hammerar.
Yes, yeah, thank you. It's not hammer like the one you hit the nail with. It's with 2 A's, Hammar. Yeah.
Okay. And what's the name of the webinar on the IRS website?
Yeah, the IRS website, I had it pulled up because I was keeping it handy. If you just go to IRS, I think .gov, or I sometimes will just do unrelated business income search, and then IRS. Usually IRS is one of the very first things that pops up on the search. You just irs.gov and then unrelated business income. And then from there, they don't have a whole lot of links, but one of them will say online training. And you have a place I can post? I can post this link. How do I do that?
Sure. You can put it in the chat. That would be great.
Where's the chat? Okay, I'll just
or email it to me, and we're going to send it out.
Did that work? I don't know if that went through. I chatted to somebody.
Yes, it went through.
That's the
Yes.
IRS site, but yeah, then the ecfa.org is pretty easy. They have a bunch of other resources, but the one I'm referring to is called the Church and Nonprofit Guide.
Perfect. Hey, Ashley, thank you so very much. This is very helpful.
You're welcome.
Grant is sharing on the screen our contact information for the persons who presented tonight. So that is up on the screen if you want to take a picture of that, or we'll be sending this webinar will be on the website the next day or two. It'll be on the website so that you're able to view it from there. Hey, friends, thank y'all. Thank y'all very much for being here. There's a survey. If you want to take the survey and give us some feedback on our webinar and see what we do next, give us some suggestions about what to do next. We appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Y'all have a great evening.